Hey everyone, so it's Hearth and welcome back to my channel. On today's video we're going to be doing a deck breakdown. This time it is the Mists of Avalon deck. The Mists of Avalon deck is one of the favourites I have within my collection, and I absolutely love the artwork. It focuses on Arthurian Legend and Glastonbury landmarks, and if you've been on this channel for long enough, you will know those are some of my favourite things. So of course, I had to get this deck, and I most likely got it whilst I was in Glastonbury one year. Now on a previous video of mine, my altar setup video, I will link it up here if you haven't already seen it, I went through a few of my card decks to find some cards to put on the altar for in bulk, and this was the deck I actually ended up using the most from. And in that video I did ask if there were any decks that you'd seen me look through that you wanted me to focus further on, and this one was one of them. Now I actually had a few curious comments telling me that their deck had different artwork, that they had slightly different cards, that there was some variety between the decks, so I was really interested in checking out my deck to see if any of you have anything different that comes from yours. Are there slightly different cards? Is the artwork different? I would love to know, because I had quite a few comments telling me that your decks were slightly different to mine, which I find quite unusual. It could be that it's a different copy, a different edition, I'm not quite sure, but let me know as we go through this video. Now as usual, this deck was purchased myself, it is not sponsored, it was not sent to me. These are just going to be my opinions on this deck as both a magical practitioner who uses them in spellwork and ritual, and also as a card reader who uses them in divination. So with that all being said, let's go into my workroom where we can look through the cards a little bit more. So this is the Mists of Avalon deck that I have in my collection, and I absolutely love this deck. The artwork is stunning. It's quite a small deck, it is not a massive deck of cards, which I really appreciate. I find that trying to store exceptionally large decks can be so difficult. And the box itself is soft touch feel, so it's almost like a soft velvety feel in a way, and that is my favourite kind of packaging for any of these decks. So it's all matte besides the writing, which is all shimmery, which is really nice. And the deck itself is so beautiful, and it gives you an idea of exactly what the cards are going to be like inside. So the front of the deck looks like this, and the back looks like this, and it tells you a little bit about what's going to be in the deck itself, and also the layout of the cards, which I really appreciate because sometimes the external imagery of the deck box doesn't always match up with the type of cards that are going to be inside. So this deck specifically shows you that the cards themselves are going to have a border around them, and I like it when they give me that heads up, because sometimes if you look at the top packaging of a box, it doesn't match what's going to be inside. The back of the box reads as follows: Journey to the legendary Isle of Avalon to experience its magic, mystery, and inner wisdom. Within the Mists of Avalon Oracle, uncover the truth of King Arthur and the Camelot story as you connect to druidic lore and the magic of Morgan Le Fay. Be empowered by the Avalon priestesses as they speak the language of trees in the sacred groves. Feel the spiritual power of the mystic landscape of Glastonbury, revered since ancient times as a gateway to the otherworld. Become part of the magic and myth of Avalon. Rose Inserra is an international author and teacher of mysticism who delves into a range of historic topics to reclaim forgotten mysteries and traditions. This includes 36 cards and a guidebook. Now I really like the sound of this, which is why I got it. I got it because I love Arthurian Legend, I love Glastonbury, and so for me this deck is a really nice combination of everything that I absolutely love. And 36 cards might not be suitable for everyone, but I really enjoy 36 cards. I think 36 is a good number to have. I have decks that have far fewer, and I have decks that have far more, and I find that too few cards makes it really difficult to get an accurate reading, but too many actually makes it really difficult because they're hard to shuffle, and generally the cards tend to be just a little bit too much for me. So 36 seems like the perfect number. Now opening up the deck is really satisfying, it's really smooth, and inside you have a little book. Now this is actually a really high quality book. It is a gloss finish book, so if you're after a matte finish, this is gloss. Now, the book itself is really nice and substantial. It's quite a sizable book for being a deck guide, and it's also in colour, which I can really appreciate. I find that I struggle with black and white books. I understand that a lot of people need to make them black and white to make them more affordable to print, but as someone who really enjoys the visual aspects of cards, who really enjoys the colourfulness of cards and really picks out on the colours, I find that a coloured guidebook is it's just so nice, and so it's really nice to see such a high quality book. Now, the book itself has a contents list, which is nice, which talks about an introduction as well as how to use the cards, and then it breaks up the different cards into Landscapes of Avalon, Mysteries of Avalon, Guides of Avalon. So these talk about the locations such as the Abbey, the Tor, the Chalice Well, the White Spring, many of which you will have heard me talk about when I went to Glastonbury and did a vlog there. You then have Mysteries of Avalon, such as the Other World, Excalibur, the Holy Grail Dragon, and then you have the guides, such as the Lady of the Lake, Guinevere, King Arthur, Lancelot, and the like, the people that you have likely been able to recognise from folklore and mysteries. The book itself is absolutely beautiful, and honestly, I can see why this deck is as popular as it is. It's really, really well made. They talk about the different ways of doing readings with the cards, and then it goes into the cards themselves, and they have a really extensive bit of information about the cards. I have had some decks where they give you maybe a line or two, and that's it. This gives you about 3 pages, one for a photograph and the message, and then 2, which is a little bit more detailed. So for me, this is kind of the perfect guidebook. I much prefer it over the little flimsy paper leaflets that you sometimes get. It gives you enough information to be really useful, but allowing you to build your own associations with the cards, which is really what I love about this deck. A little additional information for those who really like the aesthetics of decks. When you take the cards out, there's actually a bit of artwork in the bottom of the box, and that same artwork is also found in the top of the box, and this is a little detail that I really like. I have some decks that just have brown cardboard at the bottom, and you definitely lose a little bit of the appeal when that happens, so this is really, really lovely. The back of the cards also has this beautiful detail to them. They are fully shiny cards, which does make them slip and slide a little bit, which might not be ideal if you do prefer more matte cards, but they're a really nice size. This is my hand next to it for reference. They're a really decent size, but they aren't particularly difficult to shuffle because there are only 36 cards, which is what I really enjoy. I like the balance of having larger cards but a smaller number of cards, because once you get to 100 cards all this size, they become impossible for anyone with hands my size to actually be able to shuffle them. So this is a really nice combination of larger cards but fewer of them. Now, as mentioned, the cards are glossy, which means that they can slip and slide a little bit, which might not be suitable for everyone, particularly if you do have mobility issues. You might find that the cards are kind of firing everywhere, which is a problem that I have had just generally, especially if I'm not really paying attention as I'm shuffling and I'm zoning out. Cards have a tendency to fly, and I don't mean fly as in jumper cards. I mean fly as in make a mess. So might not be ideal for everyone. Just bear that in mind if you are thinking of getting this deck. Now for the exciting bit. Let's go through the cards. Now, some of these cards you'll likely recognize from my last altar setup, particularly the White Heart and Brigid. These are the two that I absolutely love using on altars, specifically those that connect with the deities that I do resonate with. And so there are a few cards in here that I enjoy more than others, and that's entirely based on my own personal practice. So Brigid is always going to be one of my favorite cards in this deck because I do resonate with her so strongly, but there are a few others that are personal favorites of mine, and I would love to know in the comment section which cards were your personal favorites as well. Mine are typically the White Heart, Brigid. We then also have the White Spring, Merlin, for obvious reasons. Merlin is an amazing character in Arthurian legend. The Priestess of Avalon is just such a beautiful card, and it really resonates strongly with me. The Chalice Well, because it is probably one of my favourite places in the entire world, and if you have the chance to visit, I would thoroughly recommend. The Tor, for similar reasons. Ceridwen, because she is also another of my deities. The King of Fairy Realm. This one is so beautiful for me. I just love the association with the Tor itself and the otherworldly connections. I just love it. The Holy Thorn. Chalice Hill. As you can see, I have quite a lot of favourites, and that's because this deck is one that resonates with me more than most, because I know all of these places. Although the Arthurian legends might not be entirely accurate, the places that are documented in these cards do exist. Chalice Hill exists, the Holy Thorn exists, Chalice Well, the White Spring, these places all exist. And I really like having cards that allow me to connect on a personal level with the locations and the topics that they discuss. I find it far easier to connect with cards on this level when I know the place that they're talking about. I've spent hours in the Chalice Well Gardens. I have drank the water from the Chalice Well Gardens. I've walked up Chalice Hill so many times. I've seen the Tor. I've gone into the White Well. And so for me, these cards really resonate strongly with me, and I know that a lot of you seem to really like these cards when I showed them last time, and I suspect the same might be true for you. Now, another really good thing about these cards that I like is that there are 4 identifying characteristics of the card marked on the card itself. Now, this might be a pro or a con depending on how you choose to read cards. For me, I don't really look at the book when I'm connecting with these cards, because for me, I already know these places. I know how these places make me feel. I know the deities, I know the figures that are discussed within the cards. And so for me, I don't really look at the book. But sometimes it's really nice to be able to look at the little identifying characteristics marked on the cards so that we can have a better understanding of the artist's meaning and desired interpretation for the cards that we can then build on. So let's look at the Holy Thorn. The 4 identifying features of this card that it really wants to bring about are the sacred, perseverance, optimism, and courage. So these are the things that the artist and the creator really wanted to emphasize about this card. So I can take that information about the card, and then I can draw on the things I know about the symbolism that's found within it. So you have the Holy Thorn, a stable, sturdy tree that represents as above, so below. You then have a traditional labyrinth, which talks about how everything is replenished, renewed, recycled. Everything that happens in life is a cyclical energy. And so it allows us to continue forwards knowing that nothing is ever truly the end. You have the wily fox, a sly creature that is beautiful and sneaky in equal measure. It allows us to think on our feet, to think for ourselves, but also know that our home base is going to be sacred to us. And then in the background, you have a misty Somerset Levels and the Tor with the Tor Tower on the top of it, which shows about perspective. At least for me anyway, this card is all about knowing that you can persevere through anything. It's about having the courage to acknowledge that cyclical energies will continue regardless of whether or not you choose to accept it. But it's also about looking at perspective, looking at the things around, understanding the sacred space in which you are a part, and knowing that you can progress forwards. This is especially emphasized by the blossom on the tree itself, and generally, this is a really beautiful card to get up in a reading reading, you will often get this card in readings that maybe are a little bit difficult to handle, but it's designed to give you that push in the right direction, to let you know that these things are happening and that you have to persevere, be strong, be courageous, and push through them to see the sacred in the day-to-day. So for me, I really like everything about these cards because there is so much symbolism that goes into it. Now, of course, this is only my interpretation of this card based on my life experiences and how I feel within this sacred space. Because if you go anywhere on the Somerset levels, you can basically get this view with the Tor here in the background. And if you've seen my Glastonbury vlog, you'll likely have seen it in the background of many of the videos. You can almost always see the Tor somewhere on the horizon. So for me, these cards are really beautiful, and you get a lot of symbolism with them that I think could be really useful, not only for readings, but also for deity work as well. A good example of this is Ceridwen. Ceridwen is one of my deities, and if you've had the chance to read the Mabinogi, or you've had a chance to listen to a podcast of it, for those who are interested, the BBC Sounds app has an entire playlist just on the Mabinogi, where it's essentially a voice-acted audio book, and it is truly fantastic if you want to learn about the legends of the Mabinogi without necessarily reading it yourself. And this shows a lot of the symbolism that is found within the Mabinogi stories of Ceridwen. We have Ceridwen's cauldron, which is a really powerful symbol of knowledge. But you'll actually see that on the cauldron just down here is a little representation of Kerunos, which was found on one particular very ancient cauldron in Europe. And it's beautiful to have it all tied in. You then have a little female deity figure, you have a Triskelion, you have all of the representations that go behind Ceridwen's story fitted into one little card. And this card talks about transformation, rebirth, inspiration, and creativity. Now, Ceridwen's cauldron is a cauldron of knowledge, and so the story goes about Taliesin and Ceridwen's cauldron, and it's a really fascinating story. But cauldrons themselves are often symbols of rebirth. They're used to represent change and transformation. So we have a combination of many different factors that go into this card, but it's beautiful for representing a particular deity, as I did on one of my previous altars, where I used the Brigid card to represent one of my deities in that as well. Now, there's so many different ways to use these cards. You have the reading technique and you also have the deity technique, but you can use these for meditation. You can use these to connect with the energy of a believed person. Now, King Arthur probably wasn't a real person in the way that we see him within the Arthurian legends, but so many people understand, acknowledge, and know the story of King Arthur that almost comes into a life of its own. So figures such as King Arthur and Morgan Le Fay, they have very strong archetypes that are associated with them, and they are so well known that even if you don't believe that King Arthur was a living person, there are aspects of his traits and his story that you can draw on in your personal life. So if you want a really motivational card, you might want to work with that as a way to bring personal power, leadership, authority, so that you can really push towards the achievement of your goals. The same can be said for cards like Morgan Le Fay, as well as many others within this deck. I really like using them as personal motivation, meditation, or focus cards for a particular day. Or you can use them in spell work. So for instance, if I knew that I needed to settle into a role of authority for a day, or leadership, confidence, those kind of attributes, I am not particularly good at that. I am very much the person who sits in the corner and pretends like they're not there. So I could do a confidence working where the emphasis is on this particular card. I could surround this card with workings and really try to amplify the energy that is represented by the figure of King Arthur and allow it to manifest within my own life. And you can do that with many of the cards here. It doesn't even have to be the cards that are people or historic figures or deities. It can simply be with archetypes. So for instance, Excalibur. Excalibur is all about power, truth, action, and sovereignty. Now, this is the kind of thing that you might want if you are trying to find the truth about a situation, whether that is a relationship, you're trying to take control of something that you need to know the truth about. You can do workings surrounding a card like this to really offer you the energy of this mythical sword within your life. Now, did this sword ever exist? that is still a question. It's likely that it never did, and it was more a representation that was passed down through legends and stories. But because enough people believe in Excalibur, they know Excalibur, it creates a life force all of its own that you can tap in when it comes to doing spell work and rituals. And so because of that, this is probably one of my favorite decks, and in this you also have a few additional features that you can choose to work with or not. So you have something like the Holy Grail, which is something that is represented primarily in other traditions, but it is seen within Arthurian legend as well. But you do also have spirits as well. Now, with all spirit work, please make sure that you go into this with great care, but you do have a representation for the fair folk and for dragons, which you might want to work with if you are wanting to connect with the energies of these spiritual beings. But please, as always, be exceptionally careful, particularly with fair folk. They are exceptionally tricky to deal with. So all in all, I love this deck. It is by far one of the favorite decks in my entire collection. Although I don't necessarily use it to do readings as often as I would say use my Rider-Waite-Smith Tarot deck, I really enjoy using it for all of the other things that I spoke about. The spell work, the ritual, the altar decorations, the symbolism. I really enjoy using it for all of those things as well as doing readings. So let's wrap this up and I'll go back to my filming space where I usually sit and let's talk a little bit more. So that is my breakdown of the Mists of Avalon deck, and I absolutely adore this deck. It's probably one of the favourite ones I have in my collection, and it's probably one of the most used. And I think that's mainly because, as I mentioned earlier, I can connect so strongly with every card within the deck because either it's a story I know, it's a deity I work with, or it's a place I've actively been. And I think if you can find a deck of cards that, like this one for me, offers me a deeper connection to the meaning of the cards because I resonate so strongly with them, you can definitely improve your magical and your psychic and divinatory practices with it. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I would love to know what your favourite cards in the deck were, but if you have this deck, I would love to know if your deck is the same or slightly different. I had a few comments on the last video I posted where I spoke about this deck telling me that their cards were slightly different, that the artwork was a little bit changed, or that a few of the cards weren't in my deck but were in their decks. And so I'm really interested to know if any of the cards are different in my deck compared to yours, if you do have this same deck by the same artist. It might be that it's a different edition that has different cards in it, or it might be the same deck name is used by two different illustrators. I really can't tell, but I would love to know if your deck is different than mine. With that all being said, I hope that you did enjoy this video. If you did, feel free to give it a like. It really means so much to me. If you do have any questions, comments, concerns, video ideas, or just want to chit chat with the community, feel free to put it down in the comments section. And if you do enjoy the magical content on this channel in this video, feel free to hit subscribe. I try my best to post magical content every single week. Whew, that is a mouthful. I hope you're all staying safe. I hope you have a marvellous magical day. A massive thank you to all of my Patreon supporters. Your names will be on the end screen in just a moment. And hopefully I will see you next week for another video. Bye! It's cold in this house. My tap water is freezing. I envy people who have mixer taps. I have two choices. Either I tip my hands into freezing cold water that's like ground temperature, or I scald myself on burning hot water. There is no in between because I do not have a mixer tap. I envy people with mixer taps. When I renovate my bathroom, I'm getting one. And then I can wash my hands in warm water. A luxury. Now, I think this is really washed out. I apologise if my camera kind of washes out some of the cards. It's just an unfortunate reality of this camera is that it has a tendency to do that. I need to get a card. I forgot a card downstairs. Where is King Arthur? It is in here somewhere. I really should have taken some photos upstairs. Next.